In an appearance on Fox News this week, the New York Times public editor offered a harsh take on the paper's election coverage and on the social media behavior of some of its reporters. Now those remarks from Liz Spade are sparking a backlash of their own. Adam Riley has more.
That kind of a headline is exactly what concerns me.
When New York Times public editor Liz Spade told Fox News' Tucker Carlson that the Times is out of touch with the people who elected Donald Trump, it wasn't a huge surprise. After all, Spade made the same point in this post-election column. It's what came next that raised some eyebrows.
Here's one.
Carlson read Spade a series of tweets from Times reporters claiming they prove liberal bias.
Eric Lipton, another reporter. White House's QVC. It has started. Liam Stack, and I'm quoting now, the Electoral College was meant to stop men like Trump from taking office. Are you kidding? These are news reporters saying this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's outrageous.
Carlson kept the examples coming, and Spade doubled down on her criticism.
No, I don't know that any of those people should be fired, but there ought to be some kind of a consequence for that.
Which prompted a vigorous defense of the journalists Spade had called out. Media critic Jay Rosen said she was wrong to the point of retrograde, and a reporter for The Intercept said Spade had thrown her own people under the bus live on Fox News. Spade later told Politico she should have held back more, but added, journalists should be careful, sometimes more careful than they are, advice Spade herself might want to heed.
Yeah, I have to say she did herself no favors going on with Tucker Carlson. I mean, that wasn't the original forum, I think. If she was going to say something about her own reporters tweeting, she should have done it in the paper, which is what the whole object of the ombudsman is. But in the case of that one reporter, he was actually repeating a headline that was in the Atlantic about this is what the Electoral College is for, to stop people like Donald Trump. But still, if you attach your name to something that's controversial or biased, then you're endorsing it. We've had that discussion here several times. And I didn't think she was wrong, by the way, on the general principle. I just thought her forum was wrong.
Well, I'll tell you where she went wrong. I mean, her problem was that she sat there and tried to critique tweets put out by Times journalists that she was obviously hearing for the first time and trying to critique it in real time. Mm-hmm. I mean...
Exactly. She should have said, I'll take a look at those.
She should have said, look, I'm not going to comment on individual tweets. I'm hearing this for the first time. But in general, people who are... hired to do straight news should not be expressing opinions on Twitter. Well, that's all she had to say.
And I remember when Twitter first hit the world and newsrooms were trying to figure out how to deal with it. And I worked for the Boston Globe at the time, and there was just a lot of discussion and consternation about how do you tweet, how careful do you have to be. You remember, you're representing the brand, you're representing the institution. Don't tweet anything your grandmother wouldn't want to see. Don't tweet anything that looks opinionated. And I do think the way people have used Twitter has evolved and changed, and those lines have gotten a little bit fuzzy and maybe a little bit too fuzzy.
I think the problem here was that the beginning of the conversation was about the headline right the day after the election, which first surfaced on Joe Scarborough's show, and he talked about it, and Tucker Carlson picked it up, which was to look at the perspective. And he began by saying, I have a great respect for this institution, but look at this headline versus the other headlines, which simply said, it was a big upset, or my goodness, it's a new order. It did not have a perspective built into it. Now, having said that, we know, and we keep saying, headlines not written by the reporters. So let's be clear about that. But it was worth discussing, why was that perspective in the headline? And what did that say to readers who were uncomfortable over a time with the Times coverage and feeling like they didn't have it quite right? And as Liz Spade said in that interview, even the quote-unquote liberal readers felt they didn't have it quite right. So that's where she should have stayed in the conversation. Yep. The rest of the stuff then, and see, my problem is, you're listening to Tucker Carlson.
I know.
He is not a paragon of virtue on journalism.
No.
I'm sorry. And I'm okay with people not being a paragon of journalism to point something out, but you don't get to sit on your high horse and tell me, and we're fair and balanced here. Come on. Liz, wake up. I mean, that was just... So the whole context after the headline discussion was just wrong.
Yeah, well, what can you, I mean, I totally agree with what Callie said and what Dan was saying there, that she was called onto that show to talk about her column, and I think that she should have said to Tucker at any point, this is the issue I was addressing, this is what I want to stick with. Liz is a newspaper and a magazine person, and she was out of her element there and being led astray by someone who's very good at that kind of thing. So this is a lesson learned, I think, very early in her tenure. Let's see where she goes with it. But
by the way, most times public editors do no TV or radio or broadcast at all until their tenure is over.
Yes.
I remember even the very first ones, Dan Okrent, Barney Kalame, you never saw them.
Yeah,
so
Margaret Sullivan.
I think it's Margaret Sullivan.
That's right.
Might be a good policy to adopt.
Right.
It's a little late, but.